So now we're ready to listen to our first speaker, Dr. Willie. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pia. I was about ready to say Magandang Umaga when you stopped me just now.
I apologize.
All right, now I have to say it again. Magandang Umaga, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here again. I say again because last month I was here virtually as well, giving a presentation for Camilla Visconde's students. It was a lot of fun. I shared something related to the teaching of grammar, which is a very popular topic in different parts of the world. Dean Marilu, my schedule is never full, especially when it comes to UST. So anytime, anytime you just give me a nudge and I'll be there. UST, I was here at UST physically actually about 2 years ago. That was another person who invited me for the on-site conference. Ladies and gentlemen, student-centered learning. But before I do that, let me just show you an image of my university. It's Nanyang Technological University. It's located in Singapore. Mark Bailden, Imelda, and I belong to this university. In particular, we all belong to this School of Education within the university, and locally it's known as the National Institute of Education. We've got a wide range of courses, masters in different areas of education, and also doctoral programs in education. I need to say this so that in the future, you could consider coming to Singapore instead of going to Australia, which is so far away from the Philippines. Pia?
Yes.
Yes. There you go.
That is something to consider. Thank you, Dr. Willie.
Yes, and you get to see Mark, and you get to see Imelda and me and many other good people there.
Looking forward to that.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just 3 points that I want to share with you this morning. Very briefly, what is SCL, Student-Centered Learning? And I will also highlight some of the differences between SCL, Student-Centered Learning, and Teacher-Centered Learning. And finally, I'm going to share with you one example of how SCL can be done in a blended learning environment in my course, in my university. Let's take a look at this picture. Does it look like a student-centered classroom? Pia, are you still there? The answer yes. The answer could be yes. The answer could be maybe. The answer could be to some extent. We don't know exactly what is happening, but it looks like the teacher looks very happy and the student seems to be on task. And the word on task is very important because later I'm going to introduce another important concept, which is engaged. Being engaged and being on task can be two very, very different things. What about this one, Pia? Does it look more like what is happening in most big college classrooms? One teacher talking and the whole group of students just listening.
Yeah, that looks like a very familiar picture, yes.
It's more student-centered, do you think, or teacher-centered?
No. Well, I'd say teacher-centered maybe.
Yeah, it's more teacher-centered, isn't it? Although we don't know what happens afterwards, yeah?
That's true.
We'll explore that further later. This one is a very nice setting, and the students seem to be working in groups. This is the kind of setup that can lead to more student-centered kind of learning. Okay, what is student-centered learning in a nutshell? In a nutshell, this is what it looks like. There you go. Student-centered learning is about this, about less us, the teacher, doing things, but more opportunities for the students to do all the thinking and all the learning that happens in the classroom. Yeah, so very, very simple, very briefly, this is what it looks like. Less us and more them. I think you will agree with me that in many places, in schools, in universities, what often happens is you've got one person, usually the teacher, and he or she spends almost the whole 2 or 3 hours talking, explaining, analyzing, discussing things with the students. Yeah. So essentially, this is what student-centered learning is all about. It's an approach that places more importance on what students do So that's a key thing to remember. Very easy. What the students do, then what the teacher does. I'm not saying that what the teacher does is not important. It is important. As you can see later, in fact, in a student-centered teaching, the teacher actually spends a lot of time, a lot of planning behind the scene. Yeah. But in the actual classroom, teacher talk is very, very small and very, very limited. This is because in a student-centered learning, we want our students to be deeply engaged in deeper type of learning, where the students get a lot of opportunity to think, to explore, to debate, to elaborate, to connect, to reconstruct, and the list continues. Pretty much like, I think what you already know from Bloom's taxonomy. Yeah, we want the students to have some knowledge, to understand, and to be able to apply, but we also want the students to continue exploring what they have just learned in many, many different ways at a much deeper level. In other words, we want our students to analyze, to evaluate, to create, to recreate, to synthesize, and to reconstruct what they have learned in the language classroom or in your classroom. Yeah, so a wide range of things that the students can and should be able to do in a student-centered teaching or in a student-centered pedagogy. Let's look at briefly some of the key differences between a student-centered classroom and a teacher-centered classroom. This is what typically happens in a teacher-centered or teacher-oriented classroom. The teachers spend most of the time talking. The teachers, I think, may be engaged, may be involved in deeper level of processing, articulating, presenting, reframing, and all those wonderful things that a good teacher usually does in the classroom. And at the end of it all, the teachers may feel very, very energized and very spirited, and they may, as a result of their teaching, may reflect on their teaching and may continue to think about what are some of the strengths, what are some of the problems that he or she had, and maybe try to learn more for their future lessons. The students, mostly they do this, they listen. Some thinking is involved, but I can assure you that the thinking that happens is likely to be quite shallow. And at the end of the lesson, at the end of the lecture, usually the students feel drained and mentally probably paralyzed. So the question for you again, Tia, are you still there? The question for you again is this: who learn more in a teacher-centered classroom? The teacher or the students?
Well,
Tia,
yes, I'm
yes,
here.
Yes.
I think the teacher
Exactly,
exactly.
Yes, in a teacher-centered classroom, it is the teacher who gets to learn more. The reason is very simple. I think you have seen this somewhere floating on the internet. To teach is to learn twice. So when you teach, you become smarter, basically. What about our students? Do they become smarter? A little bit, but not very much. That's a problem with a teacher-centered teaching. So essentially, this is what happens. In a teacher-centered teaching, the teachers experience higher level cognitive processing. They read and reread before the lecture. They analyze, reanalyze, they frame and reframe what they want to say. And because of that, they learn a lot more. They synthesize information. They categorize information. They evaluate information. Which information will be presented first, second, and things like that. They will also be engaged in modifying, doing a lot of connecting, and also doing a lot of transforming, turning information into something that is useful for the students to acquire, transforming information in the classroom. Tia, what about the students?
What about them?
Yes. Are they involved in all this? Yes, to some extent. I would say, yes, the students are smart people, but to some extent they are involved in this, different shades of levels of thinking, but very minimally, I'm afraid, very minimally. Why? The reason is very clear. They're too busy listening. They're too busy taking notes, and they've got, only small space left for them to do all this deeper level type of thinking and analyzing information that they get to hear from the teacher. So again, in a nutshell, a student-centered learning is this. It's our job to provide more opportunities for deeper learning in the classroom to happen. Another important point is that the students will have to be fully engaged. Active engagement, mentally and also emotionally. They have to be engaged, they have to be involved in the learning process. Later, our Kabayan Imelda will be talking about positive psychology. So from the emotional perspective, yeah. And number 3, now this is my thing. Number 3 is something that is now very, very possible with the availability and accessibility of technology. Learning will have to happen before, during, and after. Before, during, and after. Usually in a typical teacher-centered classroom or in the old days, the main focus is during. When we are in the classroom, when we are meeting our students, when we are teaching our students. But right now, today, it is possible for us to engage our students before, during, and after. And that reminds me of what this person said many years ago. Leah, you're going to read this for me, for everyone now. Leah, education.
Do you mean me, Dr. Willie?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Education should be perceived as a continuing reconstruction of experience.
Yes, who said that, Leah? You just did.
Yeah, I just read it, but those aren't my words originally. Yes, I think Dr. Willie maybe said it.
No, it's not me. It's a big, idea in education. And a big guy said this many years ago, and that guy is John Dewey.
Oh.
I think we have to read this again. Education should be perceived as a continuing. So our lesson, our 3-hour lesson must not stop at the end of the 3 hour. It has to continue. We need to open up the space for the students to continue constructing and reconstructing what they have just learned in the classroom. When that happens, I think we'll become happier educators. Ask Imelda about that. She'll be talking about how people can be happier in life. So next one. So how to do SCL, student-centered learning? There are many different ways, and I'm going to share an example with you. And Mark later will also talk about different ways of engaging students using an inquiry-based learning pedagogy. Yeah. So how to do SCL? Okay. Before we even try doing SCL, first thing we need to remember is this: we need to change. Yeah. And I changed a lot the past 12 months because of COVID-19. So change is possible, and change starts with us. We can't expect our students to change unless we first change. So that is what a big lesson that I've learned from the past 12 months of working with students from different backgrounds on-site and also online. It's one thing that you need to remember: the growth mindset. There's a book called The Growth Mindset, written by a very well-known psychologist, Carol Dweck, and that's the name of the book. Yeah, take a look at the book. I really enjoyed reading the book. And if you want somebody to give a talk to you, now here is somebody, a Kabayan from De La Salle. Name is Dr. Sterling Plata, and she has been traveling, giving presentations, workshops on growth mindset. Pia, if you know her, tell her that I'm promoting
yes, I'm going to message her now.
Okay. Another thing that we need to remember. Yeah. First point is reduce teacher talk. Ladies and gentlemen, it comes with the territory. The moment you walk into the classroom, it's really difficult. I find it really difficult not to talk, because talking is often associated with teaching. And talking is often associated with good teaching. That is not true anymore. I think we need to take that first step and reduce the amount of talk that we normally do. I usually spend about 2 hours talking. in a 3-hour lesson. But now my talk time has been greatly reduced, 1 hour and even less than that, 30 minutes. And if you do that, you'll be in a position to increase the level, the degree of participation from your students. And number 3, you should embrace technology. And I'll show you my lesson. Here's an example from my lesson. It's not the best example, but it's an example that you can see the features of student-centered pedagogy. Now, let me begin by introducing the name of the course that I'm teaching this semester. It's called Language Teaching Methodology. It's a graduate level course, small class, about 20 students, 20 teachers, because most of them are teachers, several local teachers, and the majority are international students from China, from India, and from Africa, and so on and so forth. The course is about the theory and practice of language teaching, basically how English teachers can do a good job in the classroom teaching English to students from different levels of education. The design of my lesson looks pretty much like this. There's a before, there's a during, and there's an after. Very straightforward. I think those of you who have read my little blog time essentially is about giving students something to think about before they come to class. Yeah, this is where technology becomes very useful. I'm using an online application called Wakelet. A Wakelet is like a wallet. It's a digital wallet. You can put things in the wallet. You can share the wallet with other people as well. Well, of course, in real life, you don't want to share your wallet with other people, but this is digital, virtual wallet, so that's okay. Yeah. And then during, again, this is the typical things that happen, lectures and discussions. But keep in mind, the lecture is very short, not more than 30 minutes. In fact, what I did last time was only 25 minutes. And then the rest was for discussion. And I'll explain a bit more about that. The after. So the lesson is not over when it was over, because the students will have to continue working online. Now, this time they'll be doing the online task via Google document. Ladies and gentlemen, please pay attention. I'm just using 2 applications here. One is Wakelet. The other one is Google Doc. Both are freely available, number 1. And number 2, both are very, very, very easy to use. So these are 2 major considerations, that I use when I choose a technological tools for my teaching. Number 1, easy. Number 2, free. And then from the beginning, I tell my students, this is the final product. The final product of our before, during, and after lesson is this. Is an essay, it's a paper focusing on a set of principles for teaching vocabulary. Oh, by the way, that lesson was about teaching vocabulary. So this is like the final goal. I want you to be able to produce something that you will be proud of, something that you can share with other people, with other students, with other teachers, and things like that. Yeah, I'll tell you more about that. Okay, now here is the before. That's why I said early on, student-centered learning requires a lot of preparation time, requires a lot of thinking, planning from the part of the teacher. So I put together an online task using Wakelet. I put the required readings on the Wakelet, and I also added discussion questions for students to, to talk about and to exchange ideas before they come to class. Okay? This is what Wakelet is like, which is really, really a wonderful, wonderful application that you should consider using. Yeah. Essentially with Wakelet, students can write text, they can add images, they can also add YouTube videos, they can add any other information that is available on the internet. Now, this is one thing that we should actually leverage on. Essentially, we want to send a message, hey students, knowledge does not rest with me. Knowledge is everywhere. And there's a huge amount of knowledge that needs to be tapped upon. And I think students need to be aware that that is what they will be required to do, going forward in the future. Knowledge is everywhere. The teacher is not the main source of knowledge. Even the library nowadays is not the main source of knowledge. Yeah. And this is what the students did. Some examples of what the students did before they come to class. So they wrote their responses, they exchanged ideas, they added images, they added websites. Of course, as part of my preparation, I provided them with a list of websites that they can check. If you leave them alone, they may end up, looking at or being lost in the work on the internet. Now, during the lesson, I tried to use what has been called the 5E model. The 5E model is very easy to remember because all the big words begin with E. Yeah. Engaged, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. That's what I do. I do a lot of engagement activities, trying to hook the students, trying to get the students to be interested in the lesson, trying to get the students to be excited about the task that they're doing. And then together with them, I explore the topic. I explain what the research tells us about the teaching of vocabulary. And then I also get them to, to try to think about possible application of some of the ideas for their teaching context. And finally, evaluation is ongoing. So throughout the process, the students and I have an opportunity to jointly assess, our own learning. Yeah, the 5E model. And during the lesson, I also then set up the Google document. It's a shareable document. And each student will then have to contribute 1 or 2 principles for teaching vocabulary by drawing upon the theoretical discussions and research insights that we shared together early on before and also during the lesson. Now, this is interesting. I have about 20 students and we ended up having about 40 principles. Now, principles are supposed to be short guidelines for teachers to remember. And because of that, the next thing I asked them to do is to get them to debate, which of the 40 principles must stay and which ones must go. So again, the students are involved in a lot of discussion, a lot of exchange of ideas, so that finally we get a smaller set of guidelines or smaller set of principles. My job as a teacher is more like a mediator, is more like a resource person during the discussion process. After the session is over, the students continue looking at the Google documents. They continue revising, they continue removing, they continue editing the 40 principles. And eventually we came down with some 10 or 12 principles altogether. And 5 editors or 5 students volunteered to become editors in order to polish the language, in order to check the accuracy of the content. And some of them actually volunteered to write the introduction and also the conclusion. So altogether, we have 10 or 12 principles plus a small introduction and a set of conclusion. And that is the final product eventually. Yeah. Now what happens to the final product? There you go. The final product is then shared through the social media and also shared in my ELT corner, which is a blog. So this is the idea behind getting students interested and excited about learning that happens in the classroom, because they have a very clear goal and because they have something to share, not only for themselves, but also to the wider community. Okay, that was my example. Now, Pia.
Yes, Dr. Willie.
Yes, let's do a debrief now. Yeah, okay. Let's do a debrief. Now let's try to recall things that I just shared with you in terms of what I did before, during, and after. Yeah. Now the debrief is very simple. I will show you a number of theories that you are very, very familiar about. Your job is to say yes or no, but please say yes most of the time. Okay. Do you see, or did you see an instance of constructivism in my lesson? Please say yes.
Yes.
Yes, very good. So the before and after, basically, yeah, getting students to be excited about learning, building on what the students have, know already in order to learn something new is basically what constructivism is all about. What about tech-mediated learning? Do you see anything there?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Oh, yes,
definitely.
Very good. Next, say yes again. Social cultural theory, yes. There's a lot of discussion, physically on-site and also online. What about this one?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yes. This is extremely important. Self-determined learning. When the students are self-determined, they will go the extra mile. Basically, you don't have to worry about them not studying, but they will do it because they are excited, because they are interested, because they are curious. It's a goal that they want to achieve. And finally, engaged learning, yes?
Oh, yes.
Yes, definitely, yes. I was engaged, not by talking, but by being part of the discussion, by being part of the interaction that happens in my classroom. How do you measure success with SEL?
I guess that rests on the students, doesn't it, Dr. Wills?
Yes. Now, I was reminded of this 90-90 rule. Yeah. If your students are engaged, if 90% of your students are engaged 90% of the time, then you could proudly say that you have implemented what has been called a student-centered pedagogy. Yeah. What about 80-80? That's okay too. 70-70, that's probably okay too, but not 20-20. I mean, 20-20 means most of the learning is done by the teacher. Yeah. So we want something like 90-90 rule to happen in the classroom, where the students are engaged emotionally, mentally, physically as well. Yeah. By going on the application, doing some typing and things like that, and also socially by interacting and exchanging ideas with other people in the classroom.
Right.
Finally, ladies and gentlemen, Pia, can you read this for everyone again?
Gladly.
Yes.
By Osabel, 1968. The most important single factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. Ascertain this and teach him accordingly.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's what Osabel said. He is one of the early pioneers in the area of learning sciences. He was an educational psychologist, and he spent his whole career building a theory on language learning, on learning, which basically puts the learner at the center of the whole pedagogy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Willie. I think what I got out of that is basically when we try to do student-centered learning, when we promote this approach, that it's a way of helping our students discover that they are teachers themselves,
Yes.
So like, oh, you can also take the center stage. And that reminds me, I am on Facebook right now with Dr. Sterling, and she says, thank you for mentioning her in your presentation. And a little message for everybody about growth mindset. She said, with a growth mindset, you can and you will. And I think, this resonates with what you just talked about, that it's just helping our students realize that they already know something and they just need to tap that, and we can help them do this by preparing our lessons very well. So thank you so much, Dr. Willie, for that. Would you mind if there are a few questions already in the chat box, but I'm a little concerned about the time. Would you mind if we proceed to
please.
our next speaker, and then we'll just get right on to the open forum after everybody's done?
Okay.